Thursday, May 14th, 6:00 p.m. to order. All selectmen are present. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website, www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive recording of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Item on the agenda tonight, continued discussion of revised FY21 budget. Mr. Purple and Ballantyne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me set this table for Mr. Ballantyne. I appreciate the board doing this tonight, and you know, I think it's important that the board is able to set the path for the budget and how we're going to move forward here. So there's a couple of points I think that that I just want to. This is the goal for tonight, for us to hit all of these metrics and try and get positions from the board. The first thing tonight, Brian's going to go through the FY21 budget adjustments. There are some adjustments that were made in terms of revenue, in terms of expenditures, that are going to be the baseline for any scenario or anything else you do. These are kind of the constants that are running through the threads of any budget that you would vote. And then Brian is going to review the 2% and the 0% tax rate increase exercise results. Again, we have some updated information tonight from the school, from both K-8 as well as Algonquin for the regional assessment. And then I think it would be good to review the exempt departments and budgets. There are some that we felt should be exempted. Are there others on there that you'd like to exempt? I know there's been correspondence that's been going around that the Board of Health, should be exempted out of the exercise. That's up to you. And I think that, you need to determine if there's anyone else in there that should be exempt, or if there's someone that's exempt that should come back into the exercise. Fourthly, I think discussion of new positions and hours. There's a lot of new hours and positions that the board had supported in the original budget. Are those things you want to stay in? Are there things that you want to reconsider how they were done, that you want to maybe take a different approach? Or are you comfortable supporting those moving forward in a revised budget? Fifth, taking a look and just reviewing the new capital as recommended by the Capital Planning Committee. If you recall, Capital Planning Committee wasn't going to look at the spring warrant, but given that we're delayed, several months, it made sense for them to take a look. I think they've done a nice job, and Brian and I are pretty comfortable keeping the recommendations that they were making in terms of the capital that is going to be included on the warrant for the June meeting. And Lisa, can help to speak to that if you're looking for perspective as a member of the committee. And then finally, any other exercises that the board would like us to do, any additional information you think you need in order to make some decisions, now's the time to kind of give us that information so that we can do whatever we need to between now and Tuesday. And hopefully you can have a pretty full-formed product that you can make some decisions on Tuesday night. So that's a little bit of a menu of things that we're looking for tonight. You know, if we do this all in 10 minutes, we can go home in 10 minutes. But if, you know, if it takes longer, you know, then we'll, you know, stay just to see what we can accomplish this evening. So Brian, I don't know if you want to start the ball rolling.
Yeah, sure. So I think the easiest way to do it is to dive right in, and I'm going to share my screen with the current budget status. If I can get into there, I think I have to be enabled though.
Okay, I'm gonna make you a co-host, Brian. That might allow you to do that.
Okay, that's probably the problem. So there is quite a big a difference in the tax rate. That was 3.4, 3.3, somewhere right around there, and what we have under this exercise. Ah, there we go. Okay, guess it worked. So as you can see, this is the high level. We are at 0.83%. Sounds really good. Much better than we were at. So our levy capacity under this is actually now increased about 1.1 million, 1.1 million, a little over $1 million. So much better numbers. These two numbers, I think you've seen before. We adjusted the local receipts and the local aid down in anticipation of some bad news. And we can't guarantee that that may not go lower, but it's a reasonable start. So let me go into what we did in the, actually, I'll go through the capital first. That's pretty straightforward. I think the board will agree.
Hey, Brian,
Yep.
can I ask you a question first?
Absolutely.
So the number, and in fact, I watched the advisory meeting last night, and the number that was being talked about was 2.46%.
Yes.
And I'm now looking at 0.83.
Numbers move just like that. Isn't it weird?
But I mean, is that the number now? Is that
It
the
is.
number for the, and is that
It
because
is.
of numbers that came in from the school?
Exactly. So
Okay.
to
I
answer
just
your
want
question,
to understand. Okay.
okay. I'll stick with the capital, but we'll get to that. You're right. Most of it's the school. So here's the updated capital articles. And again, I think the board, and certainly you don't have to formally do it tonight, but you'll have to revote your support for the capital expenses. And as you can see, the purple amounts, I'll go through these real quick. It won't take long. The hook lift truck is recommended by the capital committee to be taken up in the spring or next month. And it's now a bond in bond form. So there's no expense next year. We thought it was good to spread that out a little bit since it is a little bit of a bigger item. We are not 100% sure it will be on the spring because the warrant may not be able to accommodate it legally. My understanding is it's up to the town moderator if he wants to allow it on there. So if it's not, it'll be in the fall, but we're shooting for the spring.
So just stop with that
Yep.
particular item.
Yep.
Back before, I'd say when we had our previously recommended budget, the 3 point whatever,
Yep.
was that hook truck in the capital items, or was that recommended for a special fall town meeting?
It was in the capital items. I believe it was in the fall.
It was.
It was recommended for the fall. All right.
Yes.
Correct.
So then technically it was not in the warrant for the annual town meeting.
Correct.
All right. So I agree with, I think it's wise to keep it out of the warrant. And I understand the work that the capital committee is doing. Just from a public perspective, I don't think it makes sense for us to go adding in a capital item at this point when we wouldn't have taken it up, had things
Right.
progressed as usual.
Just to give a quick explanation to that, Brian, again, the hook lift truck was planned for a fall town meeting. However, when Miss Galligan came in and met with the committee, She made a very good argument that you've got a vehicle that is over 120,000 miles on it. It needs some significant repair, including probably about $12,000 in transmission repair. And she's been putting money into this for the past several years that she's been asking for this truck to be replaced. And you know, she just didn't want to do it anymore. Made a good case. They said to move it up. So the truck itself is $225,000. $60,000 is coming out of the water fund. However, when you look at the mechanics of the existing warrant that we have posted, there is no capital article for the water fund. So right away, it's going to have to be entirely a general fund purchase. There's no way that we could do $225,000 in cash and buy this outright. That would jump up that 0.83 to, you know, by 0.5%. So the only other way to do it would be to put it, to put the vehicle into the capital article for the general fund. The only thing that's in there right now is the $600,000 for the fire pumper vehicle. And the moderator, and I do not blame him, was not comfortable with amending a $600,000 article by $225,000 when the amounts are actually posted on the, you know, in the warrant. So all those reasons, I believe that Mr. Semino is going to, you know, say no, and that this is going to be something that's going to be taken up in the fall. Again, but the difference between June and September or June and October is not that great. So waiting until the fall is not, you know, a huge lift.
Mark,
Yeah.
if I can just add too, one of the things Karen had said at the Capitol meeting was if she doesn't get this truck, it's going to put her down a truck for snow plowing next year. And we don't know what the conditions are going to be next year. So that was one of the reasons why the Capital Committee brought it up from the fall.
Right.
Because potentially you might be looking at bringing a contractor in for this truck versus the town.
Correct. Correct. And you know, and again, Lisa makes a good point. It's a lot more expensive for a contractor than it is to use our own vehicles and our own people. However, you know, and Lisa and I chatted about this after the meeting. If we have the winter we just had, this isn't really a problem. You know, if, you know, we have 6 feet of snow, you know, it becomes a little bit more, you know, potentially of a cost factor. But again, you know, we won't know that until we get into the winter. Sorry, Brian.
I think there was some repair aspect to it too, that we may end up spending some funding on repairs if we keep it a little longer. So there was various reasons to do it, and it makes sense. But again, maybe it doesn't make sense because it wasn't in the warrant originally. And to keep on that same tack, I'm going to skip to the portable hall bathroom because that wasn't in the warrant either, but it's a much smaller item. This $375,000 we've recommended to be from a bond. We've recommended to be an appropriation of $25,000 to do a bathroom at Corderville Hall. We can do it immediately. It would only cost $25,000. The facilities director is comfortable with that. The capital committee reviewed this also, and it seemed that with the current situation at the senior center and that it's there's really no one there, or very few people there. The summertime would be the perfect time to do this, and it would address the immediate priority need there. I think we all agree a bathroom and another bathroom there is probably priority or close to priority number one. So so in the same vein, this can fit a little better because we do have a capital article. It's much smaller. I don't think it's you know, it's as much of a concern, but that is a little bit of the same, you know, a little bit of a similar situation. Well, that's that one. I don't know if there's any comment on that, but the DPW diesel pickup, 70,000, that's just been pushed off to FY22. It's not eliminated. And by the way, we've had conversations with every department head that these affect. So just so you know ahead of time that we haven't seen any department head that's uncomfortable with moving these to between years. Most of them are just 1 year anyways. So, so they're okay with those. None of this has really changed. None of this has changed. Obviously, the fin boiler now is still on. I did want to confirm that because there was a little bit of confusion on that for a while. The engine's still on. This is obviously gone. And the windows are, they're actually not going to be pursued this year either. We think that there's community preservation opportunities there to have that funded through the community preservation fund. So that may be in another year or two. We need to do a little bit of analysis on that, maybe combined with some other townhouse needs. I know we have some roofing needs and other items that we want to fix on the exterior of the building. So the facilities director thought it was a good idea to look at all this and holistically as far as the townhouse building. So that's the articles. That's the status of the articles. So you'll notice all these have, been zeroed out for this year for one reason or another. So that obviously affects the budget. This is the
Actually, could I just ask if there are any questions on that sheet before you jump off
Yep.
it? Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I actually do, Brian.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So this is for Mark and Brian, actually. So when the capital committee discussed this, the concern about it not being in the warrant didn't really come up at that time. And at the advisory meeting last night, when they discussed these as well, is this something new, Mark or Brian, that a discussion was just had with Paul on this, or I'm just kind of curious how the advisory was also under the assumption that these could go forward in the spring, as well as the capital committee.
no,
believe- Yeah,
go ahead, Mark.
Brian.
No, I was just gonna say, it was sort of a discussion afterwards as we were thinking about the structure of the warrant, and
Okay.
we wanted to bounce it off the clerk and then the moderator, and it sort of developed from there. So it's been very recently, yes, it wasn't an issue at that time.
Okay, fair enough. I just didn't want to make sure that some of us missed something along the way. So, okay, thank you.
Yep. This is the budget capital department. It's actually a department, but it is capital. So you'll notice the only thing really left in the fall, and if obviously the hook truck might be there, but is the fire chief vehicle. These are in the spring, the taser and the police chief's vehicle. The two obvious changes here are both the plows and the DPW equipment, both again being put to FY22. So that's another $60,000 that we've moved from this year till next year. That's the only changes. You may, and I'm sorry I didn't, Lucas. I'm sorry I didn't mention the Lucas devices. So the Lucas devices are now, the capital committee agreed to fund these out of the ambulance fund, or recommended it. And the town administrator and myself looked at that and thought it was a reasonable request. The money should be there, so we agreed to take that out of the ambulance fund. So I believe that's all the changes in the capital. So that brings you up to date there. If there's no questions on that, now I'm going to show you a little summary list in a few minutes, but that's
Yeah,
That's
Brian,
those-
I don't have a question.
Yep.
I just have I guess have a global comment about it. And this is directed to Lisa and her cohorts on that committee. I think I've watched, fast forwarding appropriately, but I think I've watched most of your meetings, and I just applaud the effort. I mean, obviously, when we talked about recreating the capital committee, we didn't realize what the heck was going to happen with, the economy and the pandemic and everything. And, the timing could not have been better. I applaud you guys for the job you did, coming up with what you're supposed to, which is a very good looking capital plan. So kudos.
Thank you. And thank you to the board for putting together the group that you did. It's actually a fantastic group that works very well together. So it's been wonderful.
Lisa, just so you know, Jason reached out to me earlier today, and he would like to just be able to meet our, have a few words with us at our meeting next week as well. Assuming this, budget discussion continues, just to give a little bit of perspective of the work that the capital committee did as well. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Good.
that'll be coming. Okay. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, that's okay. They did a great job. They deserve a little bit of attention for sure. So I'm gonna flip over to the exercise we did. Obviously, the board is aware we did a 2% and a 0% exercise to get, well, the exercise was to get the estimated tax increase to 2% and to 0%. I'll start with the 0% only because I think the 0%, no one really wants to recommend that. It's full of reducing services and personnel, and for obvious reasons. I think it's absolutely necessary to do and be prepared at town meeting to explain it. But I don't know of anyone that really would seriously think that this is a good recommendation, to be honest. However, it did, cut $868,000 from various departments. Or I'm sorry, that was the schools. As you can see how much it was. It was more towards $1.3 million that it cut out. And I know you received the list. Obviously, you can see a lot of departments lose various hours within the list.
Hey, Brian,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt you, but
Go
I'm
ahead.
still looking at the capital on the screen. Did you switch to
Yeah.
different, or is mine the only computer that didn't update?
Mine didn't either, Brian.
Oh, that's interesting.
Do you have multiple screens that you're looking at? Are you sharing the wrong screen, perhaps?
Maybe. Since this is the first time I've done it, it's possible. Let me see. It would have been really funny if you let me go on much longer and just.
We've memorized the spreadsheet, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, hold on.
Mark, while Brian's doing that, is it
Yes.
okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
So the 0.83, that takes into account where we left off originally with I think it was 3.43. I think the last time we met was the budget we talked about. The 0.83, does it take into effect the 0 or the 2% decrease? Or is it based on what we had prior approved?
So Brian just, we laid everything out, and then he just did a cannonball into the end of the pool and kind of created all these little ripples. So he's giving you all the information, and he showed you that first, which probably should have been, he showed you that last. But the 0.83, Lisa, takes into account all of the capital that was recommended by the capital committee. It takes into account the 2% reductions
Okay.
as listed here.
Okay.
It also takes into account, again, as part of the 2% reduction, it takes into account what the school, the K-8 and the regional assessment. The K-8, I believe, has been voted by school committee, but it also library voted the 2%. EDC voted their reduced budget. So it takes all of those pieces as well as all the other reductions that Brian is talking about, and adjustments to the budgets, reduction in local aid, reduction in local receipts. That is what that number takes into account. So it's the 2%, not the 0.
Got it. Thank you.
And Mark, can I ask another question too?
Sure.
Now, what does that 0.83 turn into if we do fall town meeting additional capital expenditures as we can reasonably project at this point? So sort of the total for the year kind of thing with both town meetings together, ballpark idea of that.
So let-
0.83.
yeah, Brian, does that 0.83 take into account the hook truck?
Yes.
It does. Okay.
Well,
So-
not the appropriate, remember, there is no amount for the hook truck. It's gonna
The
be a bond.
Bonding, yeah, bonding.
It'll be a bond. So it takes into account everything at this, at this point. The one thing it doesn't take into account that we still do not have a resolution on is the National Grid parcel, should we decide we want to go forward and purchase that.
Okay, but everything else in the capital world that we had talked about
Yes.
doing the fall previously is in the 0.83.
That's correct, Sam.
That's good news then, thanks.
Yes. Well, yeah. So but let's make sure you want it, you want to take this in total. That's why I said, Brian maybe should have saved that to the end, and made sure that you liked all the pieces that take you to that 0.83. But that's
I
why
have a
it's tough
few
doing
ideas.
this stuff remotely.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I figured out the share screen quirks. I didn't know you had to stop and then,
Perfect, got it, yep.
Yep,
And then,
we're good, Brian. Thank
and
you.
then redo it. Okay, so I learned that. Anyways, regardless, so here's the 1.3 million right there that you can see that it reduced. Obviously, the more significant impacts on this type of exercise is in the bigger departments. I shouldn't say that. Some of the small departments are devastated because they don't have the money. But I mean, dollar-wise, the bigger impacts are obviously in the bigger departments. You probably would not want to recommend reducing, the public safety areas and the DPW areas as much as this would have an impact. So I don't know if there's really any comments on this one. Again, I think it was a good exercise. I'm not as sure that it's a realistic recommendation we could make.
Brian, I just wanted to make one overall comment
Yeah.
about this, and you probably were going to be getting to it in a minute, so I've jumped the shark on that. But there's been some comment, and there was an advisory meeting that some of the departments that had new positions and new hours added in had an unfair advantage when it came to making some of these cuts. Now, that would be true if, in fact, they actually cut the positions or the hours. And quite honestly, no one really took advantage of that. So all of and Brian, with regard to the 2%, all of those new positions and hours pretty much, possibly with the exception of the minute taker for the Conservation Commission, everything else was intact and everything else was taken out of expenses in order to meet the goals of the exercise. In the 0%, the police department did take out one of the new police officers. So that was, so again, when the comment is made that there was an unfair advantage because it's easier for these departments just to simply get rid of the new stuff and keep everything else intact, they actually, their decisions were to preserve the new positions and make adjustments to the expenses instead. So I just wanted to make that point.
Mark, following up on that,
Sure.
when we put new positions into the budget, and we had, for all of them, I think, pretty robust discussion, and there was at least some modest disagreement about whether or not it made sense to do that, and that was pre-pandemic. If all of the new hours that we approved pre-pandemic were taken out, just that, what would our number be?
So if you ballpark number of taking out the new hours, new positions, and the associated benefits, it's about $260,000.
Well,
So-
I'd follow up on that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, there's an asterisk to that in terms of the
Yeah.
benefit piece.
Yeah, so to answer it a little more completely, it would be about a 0.52% increase, and that would be because you wouldn't be including, we had library in there, and library has lowered their budget. So you wouldn't include them. You wouldn't include any benefits. And I was going to get to that, but I'll say it now. So our benefits budget is done in the fall, usually in the late fall, somewhere in the late fall. And it's done, by taking a roster of who's on our plans and who we think might come on and adding a little bit so we're safe. And usually in a normal town meeting that we have in, April or March, we wouldn't know the final numbers for the health insurance. So there's a little bit of guesswork. However, I did, with this being extended, I did a new roster this past week. And thankfully, I did it because we had planned on 843 plans. 843 plans is all the plans, dental, life, health insurance. It's a mix of all of them. And we had, or I had planned 20 additional plans for the year, which throughout the mix of them all seems reasonable. The roster that I just did has 856 currently. So since when I did this till now, we've gained 13 plans. That's over half of what I had planned for next year. So the caveat on cutting, I've already explained to advisory. I wouldn't recommend cutting the benefits budget at all at this point, even if we lose benefited positions, because I think we're a little close now to being in danger of being short next year. It's kind of borderline. It's on the bubble. So I think we need to. I think any kind of reductions we saw in benefit positions, we just have to absorb it and count on that for next year. So that you'd have to take those few things out of your new hours list, and then it, like I said, it's about bring it down to about 0.52% after you reduced all those. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does, and I guess I still come back to my point though. Other people can read the newspapers and the internet as well as I can, and just sort of what's going on in your own businesses and the like. There aren't a lot of places that are adding positions right now. Most of the both certainly in the private sector, where unemployment is, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20% now, but also in the public sector where at the municipal level and the state level, the discussion is about furloughs and layoffs, not adding new positions. And that is a tough sell for me. Notwithstanding the fact that we've already approved them. The town of Southborough, up until right now, has existed without those positions, and the departments made good arguments for why we need them. I understood them, and at the end of the day, I think I voted for most, if not all of them, and the arguments made sense. But those arguments have been sort of interrupted by something none of us could have foreseen, and the idea that in this environment we're gonna add new positions to the municipal budget. I am not there yet, and I'm not sure if I can ever get there.
Marty, I hear what you're saying, although I think that for me at least, the counterbalance there is I think at least I think all of these new positions, or most of them at least, or for me at least, are public safety kind of things. And I think that there are extenuating circumstances from the pandemic that we got to be careful to make sure that we're providing the right level of services to protect the safety of the public here. So I'm clearly not in favor of adding lots of positions, but I was pretty compelled by the argument for the technology piece. I think is obviously more critical now. Youth and family services, if there were ever a time that we need that kind of support, it's now. And police, again, I think the chief made a pretty compelling story there. So to me, at least, it's worth thinking hard about doing what I think of as the right thing here, recognizing the budget pressures, but the overarching responsibility, I think, is to keep providing the right level of services to folks, even with
Also,
pressures.
sorry. Also, Marty, I just to add that at advisory last night, they spoke about and actually took a position on there are a lot of departments and whatnot in town that aren't being fully utilized at this time. They didn't speak specifics, but you know, there are programs that aren't being run right now, and there is the opportunity to be able to job share to fill some of these positions for the current time, instead of potentially you may be looking at, you know, furlough came up in the discussions last night too. And I believe they took a position for specifically that the youth and family position, instead of getting a full-time person, they were in support of using some of the current administrative staff that we have at town now that may not be as busy or have as much going on. And Brian or Mark can expand on that as well, but they did take a position.
And Lisa, I heard the advisory discussion around that too, but that's an issue that has been discussed by advisory and us. And I think Youth and Families' position was that it doesn't really work to take some, it's not an answering the phone kind of position. There's some other issues there that they need a particular set of skills for that position. And either sharing was not something they felt could work, or I'm guessing that, and I have not talked with them about it, but I'm guessing that picking up surplus capacity from other departments, again, is not something that would at least ideally fill the requirements that they have for that position. So good idea, but not clear implementation wise how you could make it work.
Marty, one of the things to your point that I will say, and I think that you noticed this, Brian, I don't know if you can put back up the recap sheet for a second. I hate to ask you to keep switching screens considering you're going to go back to this one, but if you could put the recap sheet up for a second. I just wanted to point something out. I think you'll notice, I'll speak to it before it comes up. When you look at the total increase on the town side of the budget and the school increase on their side of the budget, you know, before all of these changes were made, it was about 8% on the town side and 2% increase on the school side. So now when you take a look at this, I believe 6.82% increase on the town side and 0.68% increase on the school side, because in these new numbers that the school is voting, they're either reorganizing or eliminating positions. So while the positions that you're looking to add on the town side, you know, I think, you know, could be defensible, you know, in terms of how you want to present them. There is that, you know, when you go back and look at the other budgets, and we talked about this in March when you voted the budget the last time, is that there, you know, the school has been coming in more reasonably over the past 3 or 4 years than the town has. And some of these increases have been done because the school has been coming in so reasonable. And this just continues that trend kind of in a big way. So I just wanted
Mark, I hear what you're saying. You know, I think that 2 police officers are important. I mean, the chief made a compelling case, but this is the worst economy we've had since the Depression. And we're talking about adding positions. It's got to be beyond compelling for me to be adding positions that are going to go in perpetuity on our budget when we've got an economy that again, it's the worst we've had since the Depression, and there's no guarantee in fiscal year 22 we're going to be in even as good a shape as we are right now. And so I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree that the positions are important, that the cases were compelling, but I'm looking at the fiscal realities of where the town, the state, and quite frankly, the United States finds itself right now. And I have trouble adding positions to a municipal workforce.
So let me just put it, let me give you maybe a little bit of the other side now, Marty, and let's just look specifically at the police positions. So when we're adding these positions and in the conversations with Chief Paulus, the likelihood is that we're going to be hiring new officers who need to be academy trained. Okay. And so if they've got to be academy trained, the chief has got to get them into an academy. They're gone for the better part of 7 to 8 months. We're paying them at a student rate per the union contract, which is fairly low. We do have to put them on the town insurance. So, if the board were to hold, and it would be great if at some point this was wrapped into a official vote of the board, that you were not going to, any new positions any new positions that you added, you're going to freeze the hiring for those positions until January 1 of 2021, so that we can figure out how the state budget's going to shake out and whether we're going to get hurt worse than we expect. So if you add those police officer positions, you don't allow them to be hired until January 1st, 2021. By the time they come out of the academy, they really have had a negligible impact on fiscal year 21. And they're really going to have probably about 3/4 at best of an impact on fiscal 22. So you do, it's not as detrimental, in terms of 21. You're going to feel more of the impact. You will not feel the full impact of those officers until fiscal 23. Now, you don't know what the economy is going to do. You don't know how quickly it's going to rebound. And, is that impact going to be, worse than we think? Again, there are ways to mitigate, to try and do what you want to do and mitigate it and limit the impacts for 21 and to some extent 22.
Well,
Mark, I
Mark,
support
following up on that, can I just ask, what would happen if we did that? And that's certainly preferable in my mind to adding them right out of the gate, because it buys time. But what if January 1 rolled around and we had a better view of what fiscal year 22 was going to look like, both from a town standpoint and a state standpoint and a general overall economy standpoint? Can we freeze that hiring so it doesn't take place?
Yes. I don't see any reason why you couldn't. You could continue to do that. I mean, Marty, we may get to the point that we do this budget in June and the state numbers are worse than we expect, and we go to a special town meeting in September or October, and we have to go back after this budget, a little bit harder just to make some accommodations, for significantly reduce local aid.
Okay.
More than we have.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So is there any detriment then, because we don't know what local aid's going to be? And I know, I would assume, Brian, the number that you're using is a conservative number as to how much less we think it's going to be. Would there be a detriment to holding off on these positions until the fall town meeting? We're only talking 3 months away. We'll have a better idea potentially of local aid and where things stand in the economy.
I think the issue, Lisa, is that you're then going to open back up the budget and potentially go into a lot of areas maybe that you've got locked down, and it opens up the whole thing for discussion again, not simply the positions.
Okay.
So
Mark, I like your idea. So you get one vote. I'd like to hear from the others.
that was just on the police, Dan. I
know we've got a long way to go tonight. I can already see it. It's in the sun is already setting.
Yeah.
We could talk about this one probably for hours, but remain supportive of our public safety professionals, and this position has been needed for quite some time. I think there's ways to responsibly do it, and I support your idea.
I mean, I hear what Sam is saying, and I agree with you. You're talking about adding positions to the people that are on the front line of this pandemic, and I think that you can make a very solid argument for that. You're talking about adding positions and services to youth and family services who are going to have to deal with a lot of the mental health struggles of people who are going to be coming out of this pandemic.
Yes.
I don't think that, you're not going to get booed off the stage for that, but it's, to Marty's point, it's the hiring of people in new positions at a time when everybody's cutting, everyone's furloughing, everybody's laying people off. And
to Marty's point, I think that again, it's worth taking a hard look at current staffing. It would be great if we could actually hold a headcount reduction or staff position reductions down by another 1 or 2. Can we look internally and say, are there positions that, for whatever reason, aren't as critical at this point, difficult as it might be to move people around or out? Let's trade off a little bit to get some flexibility to hold the headcount down, as well as get the resources in the right places in terms of the public safety issues.
But I don't agree with sacrificing one department for the sake of another, because some of these departments have one person or two
Right.
people. And,
Understand.
you know, so that's kind of a slippery slope. And, you know, what happens when you do need to put that person, it's always hard to put something back when there's, you know, when it's taken away and there's nothing there. You know, Brian used to have another person in his office, you know, 12, 13 years ago. That position's gone. When he was looking for this part-time person, as part of his argument was, well, I used to have a full-time person. Well, you know what? That argument's gone. You know, that's history, and that's not, we've got to look forward on this now. So it's very hard to put back hours, put back bodies once you take them out. Even if you're just, you know, you're assuming right now that you're going to take them and reassign them and put them where they're needed. That's one thing, but eliminating a position someplace and then recreating a new one someplace else means that at some point you're going to be faced with trying to recreate a position again, you know, somewhere. So
Maybe
it's,
not if you change the workflow. So again, I don't know that there's a great possibility for that, but I think it's worth looking hard at versus trying to, as well as keeping the head count down.
Yeah, Mark, I think, and I'm not sure, Dan, I think you were saying you agreed with the idea of doing it in January. Was that the agreement?
That's my thought is we do exactly what Mark suggested. We hold off.
Which was delay it till, okay. I agree with Dan then.
We do it in this budget, but we hold off on the actual hiring, and then they'll have to go through the academy, et cetera. And if we ever had to put a freeze later, we can do it. I'd say we put it in the budget, move forward with it. Same thing with youth and family services, and that's it.
now, just to be clear, my whole scenario only works for police, okay? In terms of not really, you know, feeling a limited impact in 21.
Right.
Youth and family services, if you hold off that hiring until January 1, yes, you save half a year, but that position is going to come in full, you know, full cost, full benefits on, you know, on or around January 1.
Right. And Mark, is the extra hours?
But it gives
for-
us 6 months, Mark, to possibly know more about what's going on.
Right.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
the technology hours on your list, Mark? That was a high priority one for me as well.
Well,
And I would argue we need that July 1st.
Given the situation, well, I'm glad you brought that up, Sam. Given the situation that we find ourselves in now and have for the past several months, I think, and the fact that we've been able to, move a lot of our operations, our non-essentials remote, I think is a testament to the fact that we brought our IT services in-house a couple of years ago, and I took a little bit of a hit for changing the way we did and changing our model, but I think everybody at this point would agree that it was the best thing that we ever did. I know that he's looking for a part-time position. I think that we're going to be in this for a while, and there's a chance that we could slip in and out of these remote situations and the technology pieces. I think you could make a case to increase, his request from a part-time to a full-time position. I would feel fairly strongly about that. Tom, is because we have no backup. We have no redundancy plan there, at all. And a lot of department heads, a lot of staff have pitched in to help him with these virtual meetings. And I think it's been great, but that is one area that, something like this exposes us. If this were to go on for a period of time, I would, worry that if something happens to Tom, we're going to have to figure out a bridge pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm mixed opinion on that one. I think that you make a great point, and we are exposed in terms of redundancy. Is there a way we could actually plan to phase that up to do part-time initially and then think about a transition to full-time January 1, if in fact circumstances still warrant it at that point?
Well, I think that if you agree that you were going to hire a part-time, say in July, and then you were going to increase that position to January, have I just potentially hired somebody for 6 months? And now I'm letting them go because the position's full-time and they didn't sign on for that.
Yeah, not perfect, but that may be a way to phase into it. I don't know.
I mean, and if you're thinking about a full-time position, and Tom and I had this conversation earlier this week, you know, if it was two part-time people, you know, does that help? Yes, but you're probably not going to get the quality of person that you would if it was a full-time position.
Although actually 2 part-times could be an interesting approach from a specialization standpoint, in that there are so many issues, breadth of technology things. So you might have one who's a communications expert, for example, and another who's a network expert or something. So it helps broaden Tom's capacity in terms of technology focus.
All right. So that is that, you know, that it, you know, 2 part-timers is another option. It saves you the benefits issue. You know, so that would be, you know, something possibly to consider.
Yeah, I like that idea actually, because again, that gives you some flexibility. And if one of them works out to be super, then you phase that one into full-time ultimately and let the other one go.
All right, so I guess I'll continue on the, where were we?
What sort of guidance did you take from all this, Brian?
Yeah, well, let me just weigh in. I'll weigh in here. I agree with the approach that Mark had put forward as well. I think that, you know, deferring the police officer hiring until January 1st, but I could see the need to move forward quicker with the youth and family services position, particularly if this, you know, if need arise and that department gets stretched. And I could see the need to move forward on a quicker basis with the technology as well.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the exercise. And I'm coming off the 0%. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. This is the 2% that seems to get a lot more support from you know, just from everyone, because it's you know, it's important. It impacts the budget fairly well, and you know, for the most part, I don't want to say it's doable. No one likes it. This stuff is unpleasant, but it is feasible at least. So as you can see, again, not a whole lot of staff, and I don't want to minimize any staff reductions, but not a whole lot of staff reductions in this version. A lot of it's training hours, conferences, supplies in some cases. This was a much better exercise to do. I think for the most part, it you know, like I said, it's much more attractive. It doesn't affect our core services too much. That's good. I will say, since this is probably the more likely to be talked about, that we should probably exempt, well, we did, the town administrator and myself did exempt some departments right off the bat. Here's the list. I know you've seen this too. Most of it's, well, a lot of it is either because we have to pay it or because it didn't make sense on the moderator to cut his budget. And obviously, these insurances and debt, we wouldn't do that. I do want to point out we had this, and I should have added information technology. I meant to do that as a possibility. The board should consider this, you know, when they do finally vote what to support, to exempt these departments. Board of Health speaks for itself, I think, right now. My department, I already had reduced my position voluntarily, and my department, along with recreation, especially recreation, but my department also, the cuts that we had to make, even in the 2%, involved salary reductions and staffing, not full positions or anything, but staff, you know, hourly reductions in both of these, the treasurer and the recreation department. So I think that's a little, I'm not sure if that's what the board envisions when they want to support this. So I had a conversation with the town clerk. I'm going to keep this very brief, but because he just recently had some further guidance on the elections in November, and the cost could be significant to the town. We may get some of it back. However, it may not be until after the fiscal year ends. So I added the town clerk on this list too. And certainly he can fill you in better at the appropriate time. You'll hear more about that, but that was just late this afternoon. So I didn't have a chance to really run it by anyone, but I did want to mention it. I think it's important. So that might be for the board to consider also on any exempt departments they want to support for these. So again, the departments did a great job. Again, thankfully to them. But the overall feel was that if this environment, this 2% scenario or exercise becomes a reality, I think the town administrator would agree that most departments were willing to make do and make the appropriate adjustments that they can to get through this. We're all aware of it. Times are not good. So I just wanted to make sure the board knew that most of the department heads that I've seen, I haven't seen actually any department head that said absolutely not, there's no way I'm not doing it. Most of them have actually been pretty good about it. So again, no one likes this stuff, but that's important to note. So I don't know if anyone has any further questions on this before I move on to how this fits into the overall budget.
I'd exempt the Board of Health.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Brian, can you go again to the exempt list?
I had the schools on here because at the time when we were doing this, I wanted them to have their own. I mean, I had Algonquin. I should say the regional and Assabet, but especially the regional. And that's changed since this has been put together. So
Has Assabet gotten in touch with you? Are they reevaluating their budget?
that's a good question, and I will reach out to them. They have not, by the way, but I am curious if they're reevaluating any of their budgets too.
I know Mark Petrowitz is scheduled to meet with us to give us an update next Tuesday. That's a question we can ask of him as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things, in terms of the budget, and there may be some savings that they're seeing on transportation, that they're saving on some of the staffing, but I think they're spending a lot of money in some of these COVID, these virtual environments. If you invested in Zoom 6 months ago, you were a profit, because there's a lot of licenses that are being purchased for schools, and I think that there's those pieces. I think that might be offsetting some of those numbers, Brian. And I know that Superintendent Martineau is going to be giving the school committee kind of a ledger sheet of savings that they've had, and then he's going to be showing where they haven't been getting in revenue from rentals and things of that nature, and where they've been spending money that they didn't intend to spend and never foresaw. So, and figuring out where that ends up at the end of the day for fiscal 20.
If I may add, also, so in looking at the 2%, Brian, can you go back to that? Can you go down to the police and the fire? And looking at what those cuts are, I'm concerned about that. And I'd like us to discuss that a little bit more. I mean, when you start talking about training for the fire department and their overtime coverage reduced, I mean, I went back to the fiscal year 19 budget. They had $241,000 in overtime a lot allocated, and they spent $265,000. So I don't know how, I don't know where it stands this year on what was approved for town meeting. But I really think we should give some deference to that, and court time and reserve officers eliminated. I would just like to discuss that before we make a decision on the 2% budget, because I think those are very important. Not that they're all not, but anytime you start talking about training, I worry that it could affect public safety. So I would just like to ask that before we make a decision, we go back and review those two, please.
So one of the things I think I might suggest, because I'm hearing a lot of good information and people have a lot of, very good opinions and strong opinions in various things, but we're kind of jumping around, and it might be good to focus and, try and make a decision on certain pieces, and then we can move on. Because my goal at the end of this is for Brian and I to get together tomorrow and pick up all the pieces of the decisions that you made and put everything back together into a new proposed budget, so you can see what that actually looks like and what those numbers actually roll up to. So I think that back to the last piece that we just started before Lisa's comment was, are there any other, departments that you want to exempt? I heard Board of Health. Is there anyone in total that you want to exempt before we start maybe pulling apart some of these?
I would like to exempt police and fire.
Completely.
I think so. I mean, I would have to really look at the breakdown of the numbers, Mark, but again, training, and what are we contracted for as far as tuition? I mean, I have questions on those. So at the very least, to hold them until I can get more information on what the actual breakdown is.
I agree with Lisa.
Yeah, please, I was looking at that as well. And if you actually took half of those reductions, that again gives you the court time and the training stuff, it looks to me like. So there may be a number in the middle there that doesn't so directly impact training and safety as opposed to other operating expense kind of things. Question for the chiefs.
So training for fiscal year 20 was 72.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I asked to see the exempt list.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Marty.
I was just going to say the reason I wanted to see the exempt list is because there are things like police training and youth and family services that, for me, are a higher priority than some of the things that are exempted.
Well, I won't speak for Brian Ballantyne, but I think that some of the things that when you looked at some of the exempted list, for some of maybe the smaller, ADA committee and things like that, the cut based on the percentage exercise was simply a matter of $30. And, I don't think we want to get into the minutia of, reducing somebody by $30, $50. So that was why those are there. The benefit pieces, capital, legal settlements, liability insurance, retirement, interest on debt, those are things that are pretty fixed and there's not a whole lot we can do about them. So those made sense. But any other, department things, there's been some, again, good conversation as to.
It's the top of the list, not the.
I'm
not the
sorry,
bottom.
Marty. Oh, Brian, can you roll that up
Yeah, can you scroll up to the
to
top?
the top of
Brian?
the list?
Marty, suggesting taking
Again, I'm
all
not
the money
talking,
from some of
and I
those?
understand.
That seems to me to be pretty draconian.
Yes. Yeah, including, by the way, I was talking to my wife earlier tonight, and I told her I used to coach a softball team, and there's 10 people on the field, and there were always 12 to 15 people on the roster, and I always made sure that the first person who didn't get on the field was me. And I'm looking at that elected selectman. You know what? It's only $4,000. We're asking people to take hits.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about taking $30 away from those things, but again, we're talking about public safety, and we're talking about youth and family services, and those are a higher priority than a lot of the things at the top of that list for me.
I agree. The selectmen's is a
Like
target.
I say.
since I've already done it actually, so it doesn't incrementally, doesn't affect me.
I would not be in favor of
Anyone else to go on that?
any of the top of the list. I'm fine with the selectmen, but I wouldn't be in favor of
Yep.
not allowing the commissions and the committees with such a small budget anyway to be able to do what they're charged to do.
I agree, Lisa.
I don't disagree with that, but we are needing to find money somewhere. And we
Agreed.
are, you know, the notion that someone is exempt, I have trouble with that. Because again, I'm not going to I will repeat myself. We've never encountered anything like this before. And the notion that everybody doesn't pick up a shovel and figure out a way to help the town deal with this, I mean, it sounds from like what Brian and Mark have said is that the departments they've talked with have in fact said, what do we need to do within reason to deal from a financial standpoint with where we find ourselves. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask other folks to do that as well.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to here if it's okay. And we actually may have talked about most of this anyways, but I don't know if Mark has any further suggestions on, I know you wanted to get to a certain point. I'm not sure we did. But so I think what I'll do is I'll jump back to, if it's okay, if everyone's all pretty much, I mean, this, I think we've kind of get the point of all what this is going to mean. I'm going to just go back to the recap if it's okay and quickly talk to that. It won't take long. So let's see.
Famous last words, Mr. Valentine.
Here we go. So
Only 50 more slides to go.
here's the budgets.
Yeah.
No, not a lot. This is the budgets. So this is basically what you saw on the other sheet. That's why I won't spend a lot of time on it. It just shows the, you know, these are all the reduced amounts that you saw on the other sheet. The purple ones were ones we had done earlier, since I had cut mine earlier. Economic development had redone a budget. Library had redone a budget. Those are a little special. Oh, one other thing before we wrap up capital completely, and the town administrator didn't catch my mistake. DPW, we shifted the two small items that they were asking for capital into their operating budget. They were asking for tree work and vehicle repair work. It was very small amounts. It's really not technically even to the threshold of capital. So at first we were going to wait until FY22 to do that. And Mr. Malinowski and others asked us to reconsider that. I think we're fine with it. So we added that to the DPW budget and took it off from the capital requests. So it was only like $20,000 or $25,000, somewhere around there. I just wanted to point that out because I forgot to mention it. So here's the biggies that changed. You already know about Norfolk and the adjusted capital department. So this is just in list form, and easier is here's what's changed since we've started that 3.40%. You can see this was one of the very first things. And then going down, we've made all these adjustments. You know, the 153,000 was the 2% exercise on the town side. So here's all the adjustments to the budget. You know, we gained $1.3 million. We've lost 345,000 with these adjustments. So we're about $1 million in, you know, positive budget moves since we started this. And now obviously that this assumes that you support that 2%, and if you make changes, I'm sure they'll be, in totality, they'll probably be minor or somewhat minor. So it may not change it much, but that's all that feeds into this 0.83. So that's kind of all that's happened. I mean, it pretty much wraps that up, to be honest. I don't really have to go into it too much more in depth. I think I'm just thinking what else might change, but again, if you recall, just to remind you that the local aid and the local receipts, even though we budget them now, or we can budget them now, we do budget them now, but they will be set at the tax rate setting. So we'll know more in the fall. I just want to follow. A lot of people ask that, what's going on with local receipts and tax collections and all that kind of stuff. And, again, we've taken a small adjustment, but in the fall is when we really set them anyways. So we'll look at that again and let that dictate if we need to, make any further reductions on any kind of budget we have at that time. Let's hope not. I don't know. And there's been really no more news from the state, by the way, as far as the local aid. I keep saying no one knows. So.
Brian, what's the revised number you're carrying
So do
for
we have what we
Algonquin?
need?
No,
Hey, go ahead,
I'm
Mark.
sorry, I couldn't catch you.
What was your, Mark?
I'm sorry, Brian. What is the revised number for Algonquin that you're carrying?
It is, so it's down about 4%, 7.327, 7.3 million.
No, the actual number. 24 million.
Oh, I'm sorry, the whole number, the whole budget.
Yes, I'm sorry. Wrapping up the whole number for Algonquin.
The whole budget was 24,562,000, which was down 3.31% overall. That's the whole budget.
Well, the budget that the superintendent is presenting to the regional school committee is 24,013,202.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's why that number didn't look right.
40% of that savings. So 40% of that savings comes to Southborough then, right?
Yeah, so Sam, that's the Southborough number. The schools between K to 8 and regional assessment they're cutting almost $800,000.
Okay, so 400,000 is what we would look for here, right? Roughly.
Yes, the new number. Yeah, the new number for the public schools for the K to 8. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
No, so we're looking at a number as I see on the screen now. Southborough K to 8 schools, 21,236,470. Is that being presented by the superintendent?
21,236,470.
Okay. And then
Yes, that number is
Southborough's share of, all right, then Southborough's share of the Algonquin number from the number that you have from the superintendent is what?
So they're, so I take that. So they're reducing that budget by $430,000 and now having to break out what is our piece of it. So the number that he's presenting to the regional school committee is 24,013,202. But I do not know how
So
that
our
breaks
7327, All right. Because it's like a minimum amount that we have, and then after that, that's a split, correct?
I think it's
that
about another
actually, Brian, that
60,000,
number may
Brian, if my math is correct.
I'm sorry, Brian Ballantyne, say that
Another
again one
60
more time.
down, Brian?
Another 60,000 down, yes. It looks like it's about 100 something thousand that they're gonna be further reducing, so that would be about, yeah. That'd be about, I'm sorry, that would be about 40,000 or somewhere right around there, not 60.
40, correct.
So it's gonna come down a little more, I guess, is the overall.
So I think
Alright.
the point is
So
that
as-
of all these cuts, go ahead, Brian.
I had nothing, Mark, you go.
No, all I was gonna say is it just kind of illustrates my point is that $600,000 of cuts are coming from the schools when you look at, what in effect we're cutting. The schools,
Right.
are
It'd be about
continuing to
6.
carry the load of the cut.
Right.
That's all. It's the same point I made earlier. It's just illustrated with numbers. That's all.
And we're grateful.
Yes, we are.
At some point,
not-
that worm's gonna turn. That's inevitable.
Let's help the
I'm actually
population of
wondering for the
Northborough
long-term
grow, so,
people here.
yeah,
I was gonna say for the long-term people here, I didn't know if anyone remembered a time they only were up 0.68%. I can't remember that, but overall, but anyways.
Good work on that.
Okay, I don't know if there's any further questions, or you just want to email us with any suggestions, or if there's anything formal you want us to do between now and next Tuesday. I know we've heard a few things that we can work on, but
Yeah, and at the end of honestly, Brian, at the end of the day, there just may end up being disagreement because, I've heard an awful lot of reasonable things that have been said by, Lisa and Sam and others. I just don't happen to agree with them from a new position standpoint. I begrudgingly would go along with moving the positions to a January 1 start date, even though that doesn't come out of the tax rate, it doesn't come out of the budget on paper, but it gives us the ability to have some flexibility going into the fall. I'm just scared to death about what the municipal budget, what the state budget, what the numbers are going to look like in the fall, and I am loath to add again additional positions and not cut stuff out of the budget unless it's absolutely necessary. This does not seem time to be doing that.
Marty, two things. One, it does,
And
it does
just
mean
do it.
something on paper because, yeah, you're going to be taking out 6 months of salary and benefits that you're not going to have to pay. So you're going to save 6 months, of that. Plus, I think it makes good, sound financial sense. That you don't know what the state's going to do yet for revenue. We have no idea what kind of cuts they're going to make in local aid. So it does not make sense to hire a position in July that you may end up cutting 3 months later when we find out we can't afford it. So I think that only makes
Yeah, and
sense
again,
to look at hiring if you're going to add new positions.
Yeah,
So
and again,
moved.
if you left it to me, if you left it to me, I would not add those positions at all. This is a nature compromise. I'm willing to make that compromise. There are some of the other additional amounts in the budget that I would hope others might compromise on because I don't think I will, and I'd like to see them out of the budget.
So Brian, do we
I
need to
thought we
vote on
talked about
these one by
adding-
one?
Potentially.
Do we need to vote on?
I thought we talked about adding
one?
youth academy.
Or are we ready to make some movement on some
All
of
right,
these, like police?
I'll say one movement I'm gonna make
remain in
is back
agreement. It
inside
sounds
my
like
house,
Marty's
because my
proposing-
internet connection
Mine-
is,
Okay.
Yeah,
you're
it's
frozen,
freezing
Brian.
up a bit.
And so if Marty will begrudgingly come along, then I'd love to hear from the others, but I think that that is the right move to do for police.
January 1st.
Yep.
Dan, you're suggesting January 1st for
are you
police.
making that
Part of this
motion,
budget.
Dan?
Yeah, I support that.
Right, that's what what I got.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
All right, moved, seconded, all those in favor, Shay, aye.
Stivers,
Kalenda,
aye.
aye.
Sam,
Healy, aye.
Stivers, aye.
Lisa? Yep, all right, I heard
Brush your life.
5 yeses on that.
And I'm just hoping Katie got the vote that goes along with that, with the roll call.
It actually looks like Katie's
So was
frozen,
that,
too.
was that just for the police? Yeah, oh, she's good. Okay, so was
Just
that
the police.
just for the police positions? Okay.
Correct.
Yes. So I'm also in favor of youth and family.
I'm in favor of youth and family July 1st. Is that what you're talking about, Dan, or later?
Yeah, that's fine.
I am in favor of youth and family services
is that a
if we can
motion?
find corresponding. Well, I'd like to see it come out of somewhere else instead of just adding in a new position.
So I think we talked about the trading off, letting someone else go and then adding someone. I'm not in favor of that. If there is
No,
additional
I find it
reductions in budget that we can find, then great. But I think that position, especially during this time, is so important that it should be funded, and I'm confident the town meeting members would be supportive, even if we didn't have a corresponding reduction from somewhere else.
Agreed.
So I will share, yeah, I will share this, that there have been conversations between the finance director and youth and family to consider, a different approach on the position. And correspondence was sent back from youth and family that while we understand everything that's going on, we still want, the position as requested. So,
Didn't we already have
we
didn't we
have
already
tried to
see a
take it-
reduction in Brian's position? Brian, didn't we already see a reduction in your team request?
Yes.
yes.
So
Right.
there's one right there that could be counted towards Marty's request of an offset.
Well, I think maybe you want to consider, if you're going to make it a 1-for-1 type of issue. And so if Brian gave up a half position, that half position transfers over to youth and family, then maybe you go back and take a look at 2 part-time positions instead of the full-time position, which is going to save you, $23,000 in benefits at least.
Yeah,
I've
I
heard
would
them
not
say that
agree
doesn't
with
work for
that.
them
because
operationally.
I have heard from youth and family that is clearly not their preference at all. And I think that position needs support. I'll support it without even a corresponding, but I see that at least that half of Brian's role could go towards what, Marty was looking to do.
Well, I'm not going to speak for
I mean,
Brian,
my
'cause he's sitting
motion
right here,
is
but I
support
will
youth and
say that I
the-
don't think it was his preference to give up that position either.
I agree. So, all right, well, I remain supportive of the youth and family hire July 1.
Is that a motion?
It is a motion.
I'll second it.
Moved, seconded. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor? Shay, aye.
Stivers, aye.
Healy, no, not without corresponding cuts.
Lisa?
Brascio, aye.
So just for clarity, what was the motion?
Full-time July 1.
For, that's
the way I
right, to
put it,
support
right?
the youth and family.
Okay.
So is the only remaining
Okay.
one the
Well, I'm
technology
just gonna-
hours at this point?
I think the only other thing that you have for consideration is the technology hours.
Brian Shea, were you saying something?
I was trying to, I don't know if I'm the only one experiencing this, but I'm only getting like every other word. I don't know if it's the Zoom connection or my internet connection, but
Same here,
Same here,
Brian.
Brian.
It's not as
I'm
bad,
getting everything.
choppy.
It's choppy, yeah.
I'm hearing everything you say, Brian.
all right.
I don't see
No,
you very well.
I'm only
Maybe.
catching like, yeah, well, that could be, that's an advantage to everybody watching to not see me, but no, it's spotty on my end, and I'm getting a lot of people talking over each other, so it's just kind of hard for me to keep track of everything at this point. So I think we've gotten through the Youth and Family Services position. The police officers deferred to January 1, and I think we're talking now, the last part-time position was the technology position.
And I think is the current ask one part-time person, is that correct?
That's correct.
Which I support and would
Me too.
move to support that.
Second.
Brian Ballantyne, what's the total cost of that?
Youth and family?
No, for the
No, they
technology.
technology.
Oh, the technology, I'm sorry, the technology. That's what I meant to say, actually. I'll give you an exact number. It is 26,283.
My view is the same. I think there's easily $26,000 that can be found. I just don't think we should be adding money to the budget right now. I just don't think it's a good idea.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would ask if the board would consider looking at 2 part-timers for technology instead of just the 1 part-timer.
So are you talking about, Mark, splitting the one part-timer into 2 different roles?
I'm trying to give Tom the benefit of a full-time position without having to incur the cost of the benefits. So I think that, you know,
3,000, you're talking 46,000?
yeah, I mean, you know, we're looking, I think Brian just said $26,000 for a part-time position. The board was looking
Yes.
at exempting $60,000 of cuts from police and fire. So, I figured might as well put that on the table for consideration.
Yeah.
No, we talked about one
Well,
part-time
that would be
July,
per-
another part-time added in January.
So personally, I'm in favor
So, Sam,
of
I heard you
the
right.
1 part-time as proposed. I would not be in support of the second of adding another part-time for technology at this time.
I support that.
I agree with Brian. It's a good
I
start.
do too.
All right, so then I will make that motion. I move that we have one part-time technology starting July 1.
So I think
Second.
my motion was already at second, but I'm happy to take it off the table. I support yours, Brian. I would second yours.
Okay, moved, seconded. Any other discussion on that? Shay, aye.
Stivers,
Blend
aye.
aye.
Ratio I.
No.
All right.
Marty, I couldn't hear you. Is that a no?
Mark, Brian, anything else?
It was-
I heard a no
it was
from
no.
Marty.
Same
Is that
reason.
correct,
Not
Marty?
without-
I
not
understood.
Without cutting money somewhere
Understood.
else.
Okay.
All right.
So let me, so
So are there any other key things that you need, Mark or Brian? Because quite honestly, I'm getting frustrated with the Zoom connection myself, and I'm,
Not me.
but if there's
So, no, let me-
things we need to
no, I
cover, let's
think-
hit it and move on.
no, I think you've, you've pretty much settled on looking at the 2% cuts. You've given us direction on what you intend, what you want to do with the new positions. We've talked about the capital. That seems to be, pretty set. The only department that I heard that you wanted to add to the exempt list was the Board of Health, that there was definitive on. And I don't know, Brian Valentine, is there anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take all these pieces and put them back together into, a formal presentation for you for Tuesday night.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. That's all we had.
So move to adjourn?
Second.
Move, second, all those in favor of adjourning, Shay, aye.
Blend
Stivers,
aye.
aye.
Keely, no, oh, no, wait a
We're
minute.
on
Aye.
simultaneously.
You're on a roll, Marty.
Yeah. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Stay healthy.